So November 22nd, 1963, a president is murdered, right out in the open. And the story we all got, it was a lone, disturbed gunman. Simple, right? Well, a declassified dossier, codenamed Operation Zipper, suggests that's a lie. It paints a picture that is so much darker. Today we're going to dive into the claims made in that document, and we're starting with the most explosive one of all.
Right there. That's the core of it. The document claims this wasn't just a crime, no, it was a coup d'etat, a violent overthrow of the government. And think about it, by doing it in public, out in the open for everyone to see, the dossier says the people behind it were sending a message, a very clear and very brutal message. Okay, so let's quickly recap the official story. You know, the one solidified by the Warren Commission. It's pretty straightforward. You've got Lee Harvey Oswald, this disgruntled ex-Marine. He's up in the Texas School Book Depository, he fires 3 shots, and he acts completely alone. And for decades, that's been the history we're supposed to accept.
But what if that whole story is just a carefully constructed lie? That's what this dossier suggests. It tells us to look deeper, to start with the most basic question in any murder investigation. Who had the motive? Who had the most to gain from Kennedy's death? And the answer, it claims, isn't some lone wolf. No. The answer is found right inside the highest levels of American power. See, according to this source material, by 1963, JFK wasn't just the president. He was a man fighting a war on multiple fronts, and not against a foreign power, no. He was fighting what the dossier calls a shadow government, these incredibly powerful, deeply entrenched groups that he was threatening to tear down.
So who were these groups? The dossier names 3 big ones. First, his own Central Intelligence Agency. Then you've got the military-industrial complex, the people who profit from war, and finally, the Federal Reserve, the people controlling the money. And the document claims every single one of them had a very powerful reason to want him gone. Let's start with the CIA. After the whole Bay of Pigs disaster in Cuba, Kennedy felt completely betrayed by them. I mean, he was furious. He fired their powerful director, Allen Dulles, and then he made that now infamous threat. According to the dossier, that right there, that was a declaration of war. A war he was never going to be allowed to win.
And then there's this, Operation Northwoods. You have to understand how shocking this was. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, his own top military leaders, they bring him a plan to stage fake terror attacks on American citizens just to create an excuse to invade Cuba. Kennedy was absolutely horrified. He rejected it on the spot. And for the military-industrial complex, well, that was the last straw. They realized this president was a man they couldn't control.
All right, the third enemy? The financial system. Just a few months before he was killed, Kennedy signed something called Executive Order 11-1110. Now what this did was it started the process of letting the U.S. Treasury issue its own currency backed by silver. This was a direct shot at the Federal Reserve. It threatened the very core of their power and, of course, their profits.
Now the dossier makes a really compelling argument that Kennedy knew. He knew he was a marked man, and it points to a specific speech he gave back in April of '61 as his big attempt to warn the American people about the exact forces that were lining up to take him down.
Just listen to these words, a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. Now, yeah, on the surface, he's talking about the threat of communism, but the dossier argues this was a coded message. He was talking about the enemy at home, the enemy within. It was a warning, and it might have been the very thing that signed his death warrant. Okay, so we've established the why. A lot of powerful people wanted him gone. Now the dossier turns to the how. It breaks down what actually happened on November 22nd, piece by piece, and it argues that the official story isn't just a little off, it's physically impossible.
So here's where the two stories just completely crash into each other. The Warren Commission says all the shots came from behind the limo, from Oswald's little sniper nest. But the dossier? It points to the film, to witnesses, and it says, no way. The fatal shot, the kill shot, came from the front, from that infamous spot we all know as the grassy knoll.
You know, the entire official story really hangs by a single thread, the magic bullet. We're supposed to believe that one bullet entered Kennedy's back, came out his throat, then went on to wound Governor Connally several times, and after all that, it was found on a stretcher in almost perfect condition. Come on. The dossier doesn't just call this improbable, it says it straight up defies the laws of physics. And the proof, the dossier claims, is right there in the Zapruder film. It's the most critical piece of physical evidence. When you watch it, you see the president's head snap violently back and to the left,
It's unmistakable, and basic physics tells you that kind of reaction can only happen from one thing, a shot that came from the front right, from the grassy knoll.
So what about the guy they pinned it all on, Lee Harvey Oswald? Well, when the cameras finally got to him at the Dallas police station, did he confess? Nope. He yelled, "I'm just a patsy." He was telling anyone who would listen that he was being set up. The dossier suggests he was exactly what he looked like, an intelligence asset who was chosen to be the fall guy.
But of course, Oswald never got the chance to tell his story in court. Just 2 days later, he's murdered on live TV by a nightclub owner named Jack Ruby, a guy with known mob connections, and he does it while Oswald is surrounded by police. The dossier's take on this is simple and it's chilling. Dead men tell no tales. He was silenced before he could talk.
So, where does all this leave us? When you put all the pieces together, the dossier doesn't leave you hanging with a mystery. It gives you a verdict. It says this wasn't the random, crazy act of some lone gunman. This was a public execution. The cold, calculated result of a coup d'etat.
And that public execution had a message, a clear one. It was a brutal warning sent to any president then or in the future who might even think about challenging the real powers that be. Don't touch the CIA, don't stop the wars, and don't mess with the banks. According to this document, the assassination was basically a bloody inauguration for a brand new, permanent, and totally unelected government. In the end, this dossier presents a dark, dark alternative to the history we all learned in school. It lays out a clear chain of motive, means, and opportunity that doesn't point to a single shooter, but to a deep conspiracy right at the very heart of the American establishment. It leaves us with a truly haunting question. Was the death of a president also the birth of a shadow government that rules us to this very day? The question isn't just who killed JFK, it's who's really been in charge ever since.